The galactic conclave station Viridian 9 had seen thousands of species pass through its docking bays. Tall ones, armored ones, species with 6 limbs, crystalline exoskeletons, and bioluminescent nervous systems that flickered like dying stars. The station had seen it all, but the humans still made everyone stare. Not because they were impressive, because they were laughably small. Kalen had been a diplomatic attaché for the Valorian Collective for 32 stellar cycles. She had negotiated trade routes with the silicon-based Drethkai, de-escalated a border war between the Murin clans, and once stared down a Gorthax warlord without blinking her secondary eyelids. She was, by any measurable standard, unshakable. And yet, when the human delegation walked through Docking Bay 17, even Kalen felt the corners of her mandibles twitch upward in something dangerously close to amusement. There were 3 of them, soft-skinned, bilaterally symmetrical, averaging perhaps 1.8 meters in height, barely reaching Kalen's collar ridge. They had no natural armor, no venom glands, no reinforced skeletal structure. Their eyes could only process a laughably narrow spectrum of light. They had 2 arms, just 2, and at the ends of those arms, 5 fragile little digits each, utterly unsheathed, carrying no natural weapon whatsoever. The tallest of the 3 humans, a female with dark braided hair and calm brown eyes, stepped forward and offered her unclawed hand toward the reception committee. "Ambassador Joe," she said, her voice steady and unhurried. "On behalf of Earth's unified diplomatic corps." Kalen heard a Drethkai delegate behind her make a sound that translated loosely as, "They sent us a hatchling." She did not correct him. The welcoming banquet was where things began to unravel, slowly at first, and then all at once. The main hall of Viridian 9 was designed to accommodate nearly 40 species. The ceilings vaulted 12 meters high to comfort the Murin delegates. The temperature was kept at a compromise that left most species mildly uncomfortable and no species truly satisfied. Gravity was set to 1.2 standard, which made movement slightly sluggish for most attendees. Ambassador Joe walked through it like she owned it. Kalen watched her from across the reception floor, swirling a glass of chilled mineral suspension. The human woman moved through the crowd without deference, without the nervous energy that smaller species usually radiated in rooms full of apex predators. She paused to speak with a Gorthax military commander, a 7-foot wall of gray muscle and scar tissue, and whatever she said made the commander pause, blink his 4 eyes slowly, and then nod. Beside Kalen, a young Valorian aide named Soraya leaned in close. "What is she saying to Commander Vreth?" Soraya whispered, her antenna flicking with curiosity. "I cannot hear from here," Kalen murmured. "She is not afraid of him," Soraya observed, as if this were a puzzle she was trying to solve. "Why is she not afraid of him?" Kalen had no answer. The incident happened near the 3rd hour of the banquet, during the Open Trade Forum. A Drethkai merchant lord, a being called Sethrix, who was known across 6 systems for his cruelty and his complete immunity to social shame, had decided that the human delegation represented an opportunity. Not a diplomatic one, a recreational one. He approached Ambassador Joe at the forum table, his crystalline carapace glittering under the hall lights, his 4 upper limbs spread wide in a display meant to remind everyone nearby of exactly how large he was. "Little human," Sethrix said, loudly enough to draw attention from neighboring delegations. "I am told your world has resources we might find quaint. Primitive metals, biological compounds of marginal interest. Perhaps you would like to offer them as a gesture of goodwill? Yes? A gift, from a small people to a large one." He let the implication hang in the air like smoke. Around the table, delegates pretended not to watch. Most of them were watching. Ambassador Joe set down her glass. She did not look up immediately. She seemed to be considering something, not the threat, but the most efficient response to it. When she finally raised her eyes to Sethrix, they were completely, almost disturbingly calm. "That's a generous framing," she said. "But let's be precise. You're asking me to offer tribute. In public. To establish a hierarchy." She tilted her head slightly. "I'm going to decline." Sethrix spread his upper limbs wider. "You decline." The word dripped with amusement. "And what leverage does a soft little creature like yourself imagine she has in this room?" What happened next, Kalen would replay in her memory for years. The hall's main entrance, The large one, the one rated for Murin-class passage, opened, and it walked in. The Vakarath had no common name in most galactic languages because most galactic species had never survived a close encounter with one long enough to name it. They were the apex of apex predators. Ancient, massive. Their biology was an evolutionary argument that the universe had once decided to settle a debate about what dangerous truly meant. 8 limbs, armored hide that had been tested against military-grade plasma weapons, sensory organs that could detect a heartbeat through solid durasteel, a social structure so ancient it predated most current civilizations by 40,000 years. This one was called Vronketh. It moved through the hall with the particular unhurried confidence of something that has never, not once in its existence, needed to check whether anything in the room posed a threat. Delegates stepped aside, not gradually, immediately. Vronketh's massive head swung slowly across the room, its deep amber sensory organs scanning, cataloging, categorizing every being in the space with the calm efficiency of a being that had been doing exactly this for centuries. And then those amber eyes found Ambassador Joe, and stopped. The silence that followed was the kind that doesn't happen by accident. It happens when every instinct in every creature present tells them to stop moving and pay attention. Vronketh crossed the hall in 8 long strides. Sethrix, the Drethkai merchant lord who had never in his life stepped back from anything, stepped back. The Vakarath stopped directly beside Ambassador Joe, close enough that its shadow fell across the entire table. It looked down at the human woman for a long moment. Then it made a sound, deep, resonant, layered with harmonics that the translation matrix struggled to fully capture. The translation came through as 2 words. Little brother. Ambassador Joe looked up at the ancient predator beside her with an expression that contained, and Kaelin could not believe what she was seeing, warmth. Vronketh, she said. Good to see you. The Vakarath lowered its massive head in what was unmistakably a gesture of greeting between equals. Then it turned those amber eyes onto Sethrix. It said nothing. It simply looked. Sethrix discovered a pressing need to be on the other side of the hall. Later, after the forum, after the whispers had spread to every delegation on the station, after Sethrix had filed 4 different requests to be reassigned to a different sector, and all 4 had been quietly denied, Kaelin found Soraya waiting for her in the corridor outside the main hall. I need to understand, Soraya said. As do I, Kaelin admitted. They found the answer, eventually, in the historical records. Not recent ones. Old ones. Records from the early contact period, 40 years ago, when humanity had been barely a Type 1 civilization, fumbling toward the stars in ships that the Drethkai had openly mocked as fire hazards. The Vakarath had been the first species humanity encountered, not in a diplomatic context, not through carefully arranged first contact protocols. The first human deep space explorers had stumbled directly into a Vakarath territorial zone, an area that 17 other species had carefully charted and more carefully avoided. In a ship with hull plating that a Vakarath could have cracked with 1 limb. What followed was not what anyone would have predicted. The humans had not fled. They had not submitted. They had not launched their marginal weapons systems in a panic. According to the Vakarath's own records, because the Vakarath kept meticulous records of everything that had ever surprised them, and it was a very short list, the human crew had opened a communication channel. And then they had asked, with what the translation matrix described as genuine curiosity, whether the Vakarath wanted to share a meal. The Vakarath, who had not been surprised by anything in 600 years, had been surprised. They had gone aboard the human ship. They had stayed for 11 days. Kaelin set down the historical record and looked at Soraya. They were not afraid, Soraya said quietly. It was not a question anymore. It was the beginning of understanding. No, Kaelin agreed. They were never afraid. She thought about Ambassador Joe's calm brown eyes, about the way she had set down her glass before responding to Sethrix, about the particular quality of stillness that the human woman carried, not the stillness of submission, but the stillness of something that has simply decided it is not in danger. A species that had looked at the apex predator of the known galaxy and seen not a threat, but a potential friend. I think, Kaelin said slowly, that we have all been making a very significant error. Soraya's antenna tilted. What error? Kaelin looked back toward the hall, where Ambassador Joe was now deep in conversation with 3 Murin clan elders, her soft, unarmored hands gesturing with easy confidence, her fragile human voice carrying across the room without hesitation. We looked at them, Kaylin said, and we saw what they lacked. She paused. We never stopped to ask what they were. Somewhere in the hall, Vronketh watched the little human diplomat work the room and felt something ancient and rare move through its chest. Pride. The little brothers and sisters of humanity had always been like this. Soft, small, completely, bafflingly unaware that they were supposed to be afraid. It was, the Vakarath had decided long ago, their most dangerous quality.